pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go white. Yeah.
Okay, everybody, we're on the record. I apologize. Our court reporter, who was scheduled to be here this evening, actually called us this morning and said she's deathly sick and she will not be here. So I spoke with Attorney Miller today. Attorney Miller, any objection to us recording this with the iPad and with whatever recording device you have and having a transcript made from those recordings?
We are okay with that, doing that.
Good. If we could, you guys want to put that over? Who's going to put it close to the TV? That's probably best for testimony.
Do you know where the mic is on that?
I'm not sure which side it's on. Just to ask that everybody that's going to speak tonight, please speak up loud, okay? Folks, this is the time and place for the continuation of the second part of a hearing based on the application of Solar Renewable Energy LLC and its wholly owned project company, Belmont Turnpike Solar Partners LLC. By and through their attorney, Andrew Miller, who is present tonight. He shall be known as the applicant. Is that correct, Attorney Miller?
That's correct.
First portion of this hearing occurred on November 25th, 2024, and continued until this evening. This hearing was advertised in the Tri-County Independent on January 2nd, 2025, and January 14th, 2025, and I have an affidavit of publication from the Tri-County Independent, which we will enter as an exhibit. Mr. Miller, did you post the property?
Yes.
Okay, and how did you post that, sir?
With a copy of the address.
Thank you. These hearings are based on the applicant's submission zoning permit application on September 10th, 2024, requesting a conditional use under the Waymart Borough zoning ordinances for a solar farm on the property Linda Drake owns, located at 198 Belmont Turnpike, Waymart, Pennsylvania. So far, we have heard from the following witnesses: Doug Berry, CEO of the applicant; surveyor Joe Burgett, am I saying that right? Glare analysis expert Jennifer Brunty, and noise control engineer Eddie Duncan. This matter is being heard jointly by the Waymart Planning Board and the Waymart Borough Council. The Planning Board will give their opinion to Borough Council, and Borough Council will ultimately decide the fate of this application. Interveners in this action are Jay Sporer. Are you present, Jay?
Yes, I am.
Deb Galapani, are you present? Cheryl McDonough, are you present?
Yes.
Elise Von Annen, are you present?
Yes.
Joshua Miller, are you present? Maria Miller, are you present?
Yes.
And Maria, did you make your son aware of the hearing tonight?
Yes.
Eugene Hettinger is here, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So everybody knows they were notified by email by me. I also gave a courtesy phone call and spoke with most of you and left messages for the others that didn't answer. Linda Drake was removed as an intervener since she's actually a party as the property owner. Is Linda present tonight?
She is
No.
not.
Okay.
She is watching.
All right. Our secretary, Heather Offner Hess is not present tonight, so I will take roll call of the Borough Council. If we can, everybody start at the end, announce who's here on Borough Council.
Teresa Stratton.
Shana Delaney.
Don Miller.
John Thorpe. Shane Bailey.
Jane Barkle.
Is anybody not present that you're aware of?
No.
Okay. And how about our planning board? Who's present from the planning board?
Wayne Maycheck.
John Patowski.
East Stratton.
Alden, good, thank you. To the applicant, it's my understanding that you wish to modify your original application, is that correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And I can present those changes.
You can. Does anybody here object to the modification of the application at this time, or would you like to reserve your objection till after you hear what the modification is?
I'd like to reserve my objection.
Okay. Anybody else wish to object at this time? This afternoon, I received correspondence from Tom Shepstone giving an opinion on this matter. Tom Shepstone is somebody who has worked with Borough Council before on zoning matters, and it's my understanding they've worked with the applicant before. Is Tom Shepstone present to testify tonight?
Tom is not present.
Okay. So a document was sent. It purported not to be an opinion, but it certainly appeared to be an opinion to me. Does anyone here object to Tom Shepstone's document/opinion being entered into the record as a hearsay document without him being present to cross-examine?
Yes, I do. J score.
J
He's not
score
here.
objects.
We cannot ask him questions. Therefore, does that fall into a hearsay since we cannot cross-examine him?
It would be considered pure hearsay, actually. Does anybody else object for the record? You're free to object, I'll intervene.
I'll object.
Okay, we have Eugene Hettinger objecting, we have Cheryl McDonough objecting, and we have Shane Bailey on Borough Council, doesn't think it belongs either.
Don't forget my name first,
So-
please.
And we had you as first, Jay.
I would just ask for the record, we're not presenting him as a witness, we weren't planning on doing that. I would just ask for the record to be submitted as public comment. And I think there's flexibility and the rules of evidence are relaxed for that kind of public comment.
Does anybody know if Tom Shepstone is a resident here in the Borough of Waymore?
No.
He is not. I'm gonna make the decision that that's not gonna be entered into the record, but it's certainly preserved for an appeal if you like.
If you're sustaining the objection, then it would be preserved for appeal, so.
Yes. Okay, let's see, Attorney Miller, any objection to anything we've stated or proposed so far this evening, other than what we just talked about with Mr. Shepstone's report?
Not at this point.
Okay. Counselor, you can proceed.
Good evening, and again, my name is Andrew Miller from MPL Law Firm. I was here at the November meeting to present the original application, and we're here again this evening. I'm here with Doug Berry, who's the principal of Solar Renewable Energy, as well as Joe Burgett, who is our land surveyor and prepared the site plans for this project. We also have via Teams, via the video, several witnesses that we'd like to present this evening. The first couple of witnesses are just with respect to the changes, as Attorney Farrell mentioned, that we've made in the plans. What we did since the last meeting is there was a lot of discussion at the last hearing regarding the fixed tilt panel system. And if you recall, the system that was proposed was a fixed tilt panel system. So the panels were fixed at a 25-degree angle. The panels were running east and west on the property, with the panel faced at the angled slope faced to the south. That was producing, and we presented a glare study with, there was no harmful red glare in the glare study, but the glare study did have green glare and some yellow glare in the study. There were concerns expressed by the public regarding that glare and regarding that layout. There were also some concerns with, we had added some screening to try to mitigate the glare. There were some concerns with the additional screening that was necessary to mitigate some of that glare. We went back with that feedback and information from the hearing and the reaction that we got to that report, and we redesigned the system We did not change the panel type. The panel type that was presented at the last meeting is still the panel type. Did not change the type of inverter or string inverter, which again converts the DC electric from the panels to AC electric. But what we did do is change the mounting rack that those panels go on. And there is a system, the other very commonly used system in the solar industry is what's called a single axis tracker system. And this is a system that has a frame that is still either pile driven, or if any rocks encountered, can be ground screwed into the ground. And the panels sit on top of that racking system, but instead of being fixed at a set angle, the panels actually track on a single axis during the day to follow the sun through the sky. So one of the things that requires when you switch to a tracking system like that is to change the layout. In the prior layout, the array rows were at a 90-degree angle from what they're shown on this new Exhibit C1, which is the site plan. The panels have been rotated 90 degrees so that the arrays are now running north-south, and that's so the panels can track on that axis, can track from the east to the west as the sun comes up and then as the sun goes down at the end of the day. The only other change, and this did not change the perimeter of the project, it didn't change the acreage of the project, didn't change the fence line. We were just moving the equipment within the fence line. Access is still the same. What we did remove is we had screening vegetative plantings as mitigation of the glare along Belmont Turnpike. We've removed those, although the applicant is flexible if it's a preference and the Borough Council wishes to put any kind of condition to put that screening back, we'd be happy to do that. Screening was removed because of some of the comments that we may be getting too much screening with the project. We've still kept the screening around the fence line as was proposed at the first hearing. We do have as an exhibit, and this will be the first exhibit I'll ask to submit, Exhibit N in your packets, which is the single axis tracker that we are proposing for this project, which is a TerraTrack tracking system. And that would be the framework and the equipment that the panels would then mount on. So we are submitting that as Exhibit N, and Mr. Berry is continues to be under oath, and was sworn in at the last hearing. Mr. Berry, could you just confirm that the change in the site layout and the change in equipment to go to a single axis tracking system is accurate, and that is what you are now proposing to do, and the changes you propose with respect to this project?
That is correct.
Hold on. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Ask him again, will you, Counselor?
Mr. Berry, the representations I just made regarding the change in orientation of the equipment, as well as Exhibit N showing the TerraTrack single-axis tracking system, are those accurate representations of the changes you've agreed to make with this project for this evening?
That is correct.
And again, these panels, or this TerraTrack panel, as you see it, will rest on that single axis, and it will track the sun from the east to west during the day. We'll have glare testimony from our glare expert again, who's done an analysis using these trackers, and we'll give a better explanation of why we've switched to those trackers and what the impact is on glare by making that change.
Yeah, hold on one second, Counselor. Do you have extra one of those?
Yeah.
Who needs it?
Our planner,
I got it.
the new one?
Does Dean have one of
Yeah.
them? Does Dean have one?
No.
Interveners,
He doesn't know.
if you have, can we share them back there for the interveners to see too?
Sorry.
Maybe they can share.
No, I have one.
You have one?
I don't know him.
How about anybody else? You could use mine if you want. Sure? I could share up here. Sorry, Councilman.
So this panel as well, and shown on the spec sheets on the back page, this is a panel that's certified to UL 3703 standard, which is the industry standard certification for tracking systems. Those are the changes that we've made to the site layout, and that's what we would ask as the amendment to the application at this point. And we'd like to present testimony based on this site layout and the reconfiguration of the equipment. As I said, we have rerun the glare analysis. We've also rerun or updated the sound analysis so that we can confirm for you that there's no difference, or actually testimony will be it actually the change in location of equipment actually just slightly reduces the sound levels of the property lines. We have Mr. Duncan to testify to that, and Ms. Brunty to go over the change or the impact on the glare analysis. We will limit their testimony to the changes just because of the equipment relocation. We won't rehash other things with the project. I would like to just ask and first call Mr. Burgett again, just to confirm, because he prepared these plans, just to confirm those site layout differences or changes.
Can you call him now?
Yes.
Joseph, please state your full name for the record.
Joe Allen Burgett, Jr.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Mr. Burgett, I made some representations and presented what I described as the changes on the site plans, which is submitted in the exhibit package as Exhibit C-1. Can you verify and just briefly describe for everyone in your own words what changes you made to the site plan? And feel free to have the plans up on the board as well, whichever is easier for you to use to describe that.
Counselor, what exhibit is he going to be pointing to?
This will be Exhibit C-1.
Okay, which is already into the record, right?
Yes, it's already been provided. Everyone has an 11 by 17 of this.
So as Attorney Andrew Miller mentioned, what we had done was taken the array, which was fixed within the fenced area, removed that from the site plan, and then attached the tracking system. So that was the only change, was just the configuration of the array itself. The old fixed system, as they were fixed, they had two panels sitting upright. So there was one and then two above it. They were attached. They were within a ½ inch of each other. The tracking system is only one. And then what happens is it faces the sun, and it just tracks over a pipe and just rotates as the sun hits the panel. So there's more rows because they're separated. Those two were there before, are now separated. So there's more rows within the array. We, like Andrew Miller also said, we removed the buffering out along the road. We did also remove the detail on the last page of the plans, which called for a fixed system. So on page 3,
Page 3 of what exhibit?
Exhibit C-1.
Still, thank you.
the page 3, before, there was a picture on the plan of the 2 fixed panels. That has been removed because we have now a tracking system. So that would not apply. Everything else on here stays the same.
And Mr. Berget, were there any changes in the fence configuration?
If anything, with a foot or two, not much at all. You would notice it by looking at the plan.
And was there any change in the access to the project?
No change in the access.
And will the project is configured, will you still comply with, and I believe on your detail sheet you have information from the DEP FAQs for stormwater, will you still comply with stormwater management requirements?
Yes, sir.
Through DEP or through the borough's ordinances?
Yes, sir.
And can you just describe again and make sure you have clear on the record what the changes were with the screening along Belmont Turnpike?
Yes, before there was screening out in front of, right along Belmont Turnpike, between each building, so that there would have been a continuous buffer between the road and the field. All of that buffering has been removed from that.
And the screening around outside of the fence line on the project, has that remained the same as what was proposed previously?
Yes.
Is there anything else about the layout of this, or this revised layout of the equipment, or the revised location of the equipment, that in any other way affects your testimony from the November 25 hearing?
The only equipment change was the tracking system. We do have a couple of new pieces of equipment. We have a weather station, or 2 weather stations at opposite corner. And then you have also a network station that's out front. So those were new equipment that was been added.
And those weather stations are to monitor the weather conditions so that the panels can be moved or stowed if there's any adverse weather events.
Yes.
And the network stations make sure that the panels are able to accurately track the sun throughout the day.
Yes.
And aside from those equipment changes with respect to your site plans, again, there haven't been other changes brought about by the revision.
No.
Those are all the questions I have for Mr. Berget. If anyone would like to ask any questions at this time.
If we could, I'll call the interveners first. Jay Sporer, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. No, it would actually be for Joe or Doug.
You feel free to stand up if you like and
Yes.
speak loudly, please.
I'm a little confused by the tracking system. Now, is this going to allow these panels to rotate east to west, or do they generally tip more north to south?
They'll rotate east to west.
East to west?
With the perpendicular right to the sun.
Okay.
So they will tip on the axis from east to west.
So they're actually laid out differently.
90
They're no longer facing the direction to the south as they did.
Correct.
So now they
That's
turn 180 or 90 degrees,
Correct.
facing the other direction. I'll have questions, I guess, for your glare analysis later. Thank you. Please, one more question.
Sure.
Doug, I believe I asked you about these last time around, and you said you did not want to use a rotating panel. You had used them in the past and they were problematic, and you just found that it wasn't worth the additional expense. What has changed your mind now?
The ones that we had used in the past were 15, 20 years ago,
Okay,
so they were in a bankruptcy that we had purchased. We've done a bunch of analysis here, and this is actually what a fair number of, maybe even the majority of, larger solar developers like this utilize. It's just something we have not evolved, significantly into. And this is something that I think works to try to address your issues that you have, because a lot of it was on the glare. I thought that, this made the most sense of trying to, work with, the residents and to try to make everybody, pleased with what was happening with it all. So-
Thank you.
For the record, that was Mr. Berry testifying. Okay. Cheryl McDonough, would you like to ask any questions?
Well, from the last meeting to this meeting, what happened or why exactly did we decide that to propose this new way to do it?
The glare, it was all.
It's all about the glare.
Yes.
So with this way, you're saying there'll be less or no glare.
Correct.
Yeah, that was the, and as Mr. Berry testified the last time, he'll have to make a bigger capital investment in the project to go to this kind of a system. But in doing so, it will, and we'll show through the glare analysis, it will address the glare concerns from the fixed system. So this was, after consulting with Mr. Berry and with our glare expert, this was the best way to address those concerns and address them as conclusively as we could.
Okay, I have a follow-up. If these things are gonna be moving with the sun, is that gonna create any other kind of noise with with all these panels moving?
Yeah, as I indicated, we had Mr. Duncan, who testified at the last hearing. We had him take that into account, and he'll be able to answer that question. We reran that analysis to make sure that there's no impact or no change, no adverse change in the noise resulting from the project. So we'll actually have him testify next as to that.
Okay. That's all.
Elise Van Anen, any questions?
No questions.
Maria Miller, any questions?
No questions.
Eugene Hediger, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, anybody on Borough Council? We'll start with Teresa and work our way around.
No questions.
No questions.
So is it less glare or no glare now?
We will, I can preview what the result is.
Right.
It's no glare, but we will have our glare expert testify to that again. We also have a separate expert who's looked at that glare analysis and can testify about that as well or answer questions.
No question.
Jane Bailey? Jane, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, I have a few questions. There's gonna be motors on these now, moving these, is that correct?
There is and I believe in the spec sheet, there's a 12 volt, I believe, DC motor that drives. If you look at the last page of the specifications, there's a 12 volt battery powered motor that will move the panels, yes.
And how many motors will there be?
You know the answer to that Doug, for the total layout?
I do not. I don't have it. We'll get to that, but
Okay.
No idea whatsoever? I mean, how is there gonna be a motor for every panel?
I believe we have in the noise analysis, which we'll go over next, and in the noise study, we have actually shown, I don't know the number of them, but we have actually shown the motors, and those were provided to the noise expert, those details.
What do you mean you provided the motors to them?
The number and the configuration, and we'll go over this in his testimony.
Okay, so
He
he
did
knows
take
how many
into
motors
account, yes, I think he does.
And did he test those for sound?
Could we have him testify as to how he analyzed those? He'll be able to answer.
My
this
question is, did you have him test those motors for sound?
I believe he worked off of the specifications for the motors as well. but he will be able to testify to that.
You mentioned weather stations and network stations. Does anybody know how big they are and whether they make any noise?
I believe our sound expert will be able to testify about the noise from those in his experience with projects. I don't know that we have a detail on here of the size of those weather stations, although you do, Mr. Burgess does have them shown.
I just have a symbol shown. I don't know the size of them.
You don't know if they're the size of a tractor trailer
No, I
or a
will
bread
tell you-
box.
I will tell you they're the size of two panels. The size that's drafted on here was given to me by the electrical company, the person, the racking company. And the way they drew them, the symbol of those would be represented to like two panels, so maybe 14 by 14, 15 by 15.
Feet?
Yes, sir.
And are they enclosed in a structure of any type?
I do not know that.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions based on my questions? Sean Vitoski has a question from the planning board.
I have a couple of questions, but I don't know who's supposed to answer. Am I asking?
You
this
could ask them
gentleman-
all now, or they could tell you whether they could answer them or not, and if not, we'll get somebody coming in next.
The company that's putting these in, that would be you, right?
We'd be the general contractor.
Okay.
But we actually
Have you ever done, have you ever,
We have subs that we've used numerous times that have done this sort of installation with all. That'd be like MDE and DMH.
okay, so you have no knowledge of the tilting ones at all?
I personally don't, but people within our group does, within our firm.
Okay. Now, has your firm ever done a project with these tilting ones?
We have other people that have done that, yes, as part of the teamwork.
The distance between these panels now, is that just like another panel distance?
It's about 7.5 feet. Yes, sir.
And that's the width of the panel, or the length of the panel?
That's about right. Yes. Yeah, there's dimensions on here, 7.5 feet for the aisles. That's correct.
That's all I have right now.
Wayne Maycheck, any questions?
I do. I have a couple. I understand that since there's a motor with these that moves, how is that motor powered? Is it powered coming up from a battery on the, well, answer that. I'm not trying to answer for you.
Yeah, it is a battery-powered motor, which is in the specification for the tracker. It would be powered by the DC current in the system.
Okay. Now with this motor, that puts the panel obviously in motion. Now, does this motion, what's the swing of how far this goes? Does it go from like a 60-degree angle over to a 60-degree angle by the end of the day, or does it?
So it depends on the time of the year and the angle of the sun. They would be programmed, but the tracker that is provided or proposed here and the assumptions that went into the glare study, how they would be programmed, and they can be programmed, so there's flexibility with some of those things. We've anticipated a range from 10 degrees at a resting angle, which would be the lowest angle, up to 50 degrees at a stowed angle, which would be the maximum angle.
Okay, then if that's the case, if this is an object in motion, is it possible that it could become a hazard to any living in that area? I mean,
We have one of our experts who will testify is Thomas Cleveland. He's a mechanical engineer. He actually taught solar facility design at North Carolina State at their college, at their School of Aerospace and Mechanical Engineering. We can have him address that question and whether these systems present any kind of safety concerns. He's done a health and safety assessment of the project for us, and he will testify this evening, and we have had him join to testify to specifically talk about any health and safety concerns.
Okay, again, this is, now, I think the plan was where the grass would be maintained by livestock, right? Sheep would be in there. Now, would this be a hazard to the livestock? The motion, it gets its head stuck in there or something crazy like that.
I can say from my own experience, I've worked on numerous projects with proposed sheep grazing that have used tracking systems. The tracking system is, as Mr. Berry indicated, is more common now, or nowadays, is more common than the fixed tilt system. And there are numerous systems that are proposed with sheep grazing.
Okay,
There's
great.
actually a very, there's a large one in York County that has sheep grazing proposed or is using sheep grazing.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Norella? Anybody have any questions based on the questions you heard after you asked your questions?
I do.
Yes, Jay.
Being these are.
Please announce your name when you, just for the record, when you stand up, okay?
Jay Spore. Being these are battery operated, are these batteries contained with anything to prevent any spillage? Should there be an issue? That battery and acid or anything else that goes along with that?
I'd like to have our health and safety expert address those questions and answer those questions as part of his testimony.
Okay.
I'm not the engineer, I'm not the qualified expert on this evening, and I think he would probably be the best person to address that and understands these systems.
Fair enough.
I have a question.
Stand up, please,
You-
Cheryl, and
Cheryl
announce your
McDonough.
name.
I mean, you had just stated that this is the new thing or the better thing. And so 2 months ago when we were here, why weren't we doing the new, better thing from the beginning? Why did we change?
I didn't say that this is the new or better thing. I think these have been around for a long time. There are pluses. There's also, as we indicated, I mean, there's a cost to installing them. What I just said is that these are, in my personal experience working with developers, this is the more prevalent system nowadays. It's not a new concept. It just seems to be what more developers are using and proposing nowadays. I think my client proposed the fixed tilt, and if there weren't the concerns with glare and the impact or the results that were shown in the glare analysis, would probably be sticking with that system. But this is an alternative that we think will function very well, but will certainly improve concerns about glare.
I have another question. So I'm just a little confused, or maybe not educated enough, but before we were just gonna have fixed panels looking in one direction and the sun would hit them throughout the day. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you said there was gonna be some glare with those. Is that
Correct.
correct? So now you have these panels that are gonna track with the sun, right? So that's correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for, 12, 14 hours a day, depending the time of the year, the sun will constantly be hitting these, and there should be a reflection somewhere, right?
I think it's because of the angle. It's keeping a certain 90-degree angle to the panel.
So when
that
you
it-
say
that
it,
it deducts, that it reduces that possibility of that glare.
yeah,
I think at a low angle, looking at it, it may produce some glare, but I think the glare expert would be able to answer that a lot better than I would.
so, so when you say a 90-degree angle, what's at a 90-degree angle?
Well, so the panel's tracking the sun, right? So the sun's up here,
Yeah,
it's
So-
moving and keeping that angle more of a direct 90 degrees, right?
Yeah, and I think in our glare analysis, I think our glare expert will be better suited to explain that, as well as Mr. Cleveland has reviewed that analysis and from his engineering perspective as well, can explain that. But The difference is, and if you remember, the glare all appeared in early morning and in the evening, so at sunrise and sunset. At those times, there's a very low angle, or a very low angle of the sun to the panel, and so it reflects off at a low angle, which causes it to hit lower obstructions around the buildings. By going to a tracking system, you keep that angle, you change that angle, and so you don't get that redirection of the sun. You get the redirection of the sun straight back up into the air.
And that was my question. So these are gonna face directly at the sun, so it's gonna be like looking into a mirror. If the sun comes down and hit it at the right angle with these, it's gonna reflect back at the sun and not somewhere else?
I think
Is that your
So-
testimony?
No, I think you need to talk to the glare
Okay.
about
Yeah,
that.
so
honestly.
All right.
let's let them answer those questions, because I
Okay.
think they'll be able to explain that better. And I do emphasize again, I mean, these are black, dark colored panels, and they have an anti-reflective coating on them to begin, so these are not mirrors, this is not that kind of a system at all. There will be no indirect glare reflection of that nature.
But there is glass or plastic on top of the panel?
Yeah, and Mr. Cleveland can explain and answer all your questions regarding the construction of the panels. He's an expert in that and understands these probably as well as anyone.
Okay.
So I'd like to next just call Eddie Duncan again to review, and in your exhibit packets, there's an exhibit G-1, which is a noise analysis that Mr. Duncan updated to take into account this change to a tracking panel system. Hi, good evening, Mr. Duncan. Are you able to hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. And were you able to hear the testimony that we just had regarding the changes in the site layout?
Yes.
Let's swear him in first. Sir, state your name for the record.
My name is Edward Duncan.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Duncan, you've listened to the testimony regarding the changes in the site layout and the change to the tracking panel system tonight. Were you provided a design and configuration for the tracking system and the revised layout of the project?
Yes, I was.
And did you have a chance to review exhibit, what we submitted as exhibit C1, which was the site plan, which was also shared with you on Teams?
Yes, I have.
And is that site plan and layout of panels, is that consistent with the updated, the design layout that you used for your updated sound analysis or noise analysis?
It is, yes.
And were you provided the specifications for the TerraTrack equipment to know what type of or class of tracking system was proposed for this project?
Yeah, Sweetwater.
And did you do an updated, did you prepare Exhibit G1, which is the updated sound or noise analysis for this project based on those changes and that configuration?
Yes, we prepared that.
Would you just, if you could share from your computer that report and just review that report with the Borough Council and the public this evening, and what your findings were based on that report?
Yes, I can do that.
And in addition, as you do that, there were some questions that I think you heard during the introduction as we were discussing that change in layout regarding the motors for the trackers. So if you could just make sure to address that in your presentation.
Yes, I can do that. So for the ease of, since we've already provided a noise assessment previously, for the ease of understanding the changes that have been made, the noise assessment that we're showing here and that's provided in the exhibit provides a note at the beginning that provides an overview of what those changes are that have been made to the noise report, and also what the result is in terms of updating our conclusions. The primary changes that were made were shifting the inverters 53 feet, approximately 53 feet to the north. In the noise model, it's the same inverters that were modeled previously, just shifted 53 feet. And the transformer remained in the same location. And then we also added the tracking motors that we were discussing previously. The number of inverters hasn't changed, it's just shifting what was previously in the model, approximately 53 feet to the north. There was the question about the number of inverters, or excuse me, tracking motors a few minutes ago. The tracking motors that we modeled in the noise assessment were the same locations that were provided by the applicant to us, which is a total of 94 tracking motors, which is approximately one tracking motor per solar row. And so that's what is included in the model. And I believe we can see that here on page 2 and figure 1 of the updated noise assessment, where the string inverters are represented by the small yellow circles. The transformer is represented by the light blue square, and then there's a series of green circles that represent one tracker per row there. And so that's what has been included in the noise model, is what is shown in figure 1 here. We took the manufacturer data from the trackers and used that as input into the model. They provided sound emission data for that those tracking motors, and we included that in the model. In the end, the model result with all of those sources operating and calculating the day-night level, the LDN, which is what is, as we discussed in the previous hearing, regulated in the local ordinance there. We were able to calculate the LDN throughout the entire area, including at the property lines.
Mr. Duncan, do us a favor, don't use any initials, all right? Say the words.
Say
LDN.
day-night level?
That's right, use the words, please, for everybody.
Yes. So the day-night level, which is abbreviated LDN, and I'm only going to point that out because that's, if you're looking at the figure, you're going to see LDN and not the words. So the day-night level is calculated throughout the project area, including at the project property line. And the highest property line day-night level is in the same location as it was previously, but is now 1 decibel less. And the reason for that is that the primary source of sound from the project are the inverters, and the inverters are shifted 53 feet to the north. And so since the highest property line sound level was to the south, when we shift those inverters 53 feet to the north, that property line location is reduced by 1 decibel. So it was previously, when I testified, 35 dBA, that's decibel A weighted level. is now 34 dBA, decibel A rated level. So the conclusion of the noise assessment is the same as it was previously. So that is that 34 decibels is significantly less than the ordinance limit of 65 decibels. It would meet the ordinance requirements with the updated layout and equipment.
And Mr. Duncan, at the prior hearing, you had testified regarding the assumptions that went into your model. In this layout, have you changed any of the assumptions related to the topography of the site?
No, the topography and all of the sound propagation algorithms are exactly the same as they were previously. The only difference is the addition of the tracking motors and the shifting of the inverters 53 feet to the north.
And the addition of the tracking motors, again, just to be clear, is not contributing or creating any additional sound at the property line from what you were finding previously. Is that correct?
We see some additional sound to the east. So if we look at the figure, which I believe is on your screen here currently, you can see that the sound propagates a little further to the east than it had in the previous report. And so there might be a change in sound level to the east, but not to the highest levels along the property line. The highest levels along the property line have been reduced.
And that, just to be clear, that change to the east is not creating any sound exceedance at the property line to the east of the property?
That's correct.
You mentioned as well, I think, sound propagation assumptions. Those are the assumptions related to atmospheric conditions and things like wind, is that correct?
Yes.
And can you explain again for everyone what assumptions you're making in this model regarding atmospheric conditions and wind direction?
Yeah, so the model is assuming that the sun is out, the inverters are running at full capacity, and the tracking motors are operating at the same time that the transformer is operating. In addition to that, wind is being generated essentially at the sources, so everybody, all property lines and receptors are downwind of the sources, which is an impossible but conservative way of assessing sound, because sound will travel further downwind. And so we're assuming that every receptor is downwind.
And with respect to the tracking systems, there were some questions asked, or there was a question asked earlier about how you measured or how you input the sound levels or the expected noise to be generated by the motors and the tracking system. Could you explain that as well?
Yes, so the manufacturer provides sound level data on the tracking motors. That data shows that the tracking motors are approximately 61.5 decibels at 1 foot. To put that into perspective, this is one of the reasons why the tracking motors are a minor source. The inverters are 65 decibels at 3 1/4 feet. So the inverters are an order of magnitude louder than the transformer or the tracking motors.
And so you've taken into account as well in your analysis, and your testimony is that even if these are functioning or working at the same time, your analysis is accurate the way it's stated, and the sound levels at the property lines that you've described and you found in your analysis, those are are accurate. In other words, and if I can just maybe simplify for the question for you, the analysis you've performed assumes that the motors and the inverters are operating at the same time.
That's correct, and it's important to note that the tracking motors would only operate, for a few minutes per hour, say approximately 5 minutes per hour as it's tracking the sun. It's not a constant source.
And there were some questions asked about noise levels for the weather stations and the network station or cabinet on the property. Can you address those items and whether there would be any noise generated by those or any reason that those wouldn't be included specifically in your report?
Yeah, so I'm not aware of any sound producing mechanisms within that type of system, and the systems that we've seen in person, we haven't heard sound emissions off of that, so that's not something we would really include in a noise assessment like this.
And that's based on your experience. You have done other noise assessments for tracking systems, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you have any approximation how many tracking systems you may have modeled?
I don't. I've done over 80 solar projects, and I would say approximately half include trackers.
So, based on your review of the changes in the site design and the equipment, again, it's your professional opinion that this project will not exceed the allowed noise levels under the Waymar Borough zoning ordinance at the property lines. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And are you, again, offering that opinion with a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't think I have any other questions for Mr. Duncan right now, and I'd open him up to any questions.
Thank you. We'll start with the interveners. Jay Sporer, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Cheryl McDonough, do you have any questions?
I just want to understand the previous thing that was submitted and the new one that's being submitted now. Is it going to take up more area, overall square feet of the property? Or is it going to be basically the same?
Mr. Berga testified that the fence line is essentially the same fence line. And Mr. Berga, if you want to answer that question, because you prepared the site plans, I don't want to.
It does not take up any more space than the previous design.
The panels themselves are within the same
Fenced in.
Well, I know you're fenced in, so but did the actual panels exceed closer to the fence line?
No, it was very close to the original location.
Okay, well, it's pretty big. Okay.
You have a copy to
Elise Von Anna,
No questions.
Maria Miller,
No questions.
Eugene Hediger.
No question.
Borough Council members, Teresa Stratton, any questions?
No questions.
Shayna Delaney,
No questions.
Don Miller,
No.
Randy Thorpe, Shane Bailey,
No questions.
Jane Varco,
No questions.
John Vitoski from the
Yep.
Planning Commission.
Yes. Since these panels now are pivoting, will the wind cause any noise from these panels? Like an example, like a reed, like in a musical instrument. Will the
Airflow.
will the airflow of like going through these panels cause any noise?
Mr. Duncan, did you hear that? Did you hear that question?
I did hear that question, yes. In my experience in working on a whole bunch of solar projects, I've yet to come across a case where there is a sound issue related to sound flowing over the components of the project itself.
Thank you.
Wayne Maycheck,
I have no question.
Dean Stratton,
No questions.
Mayor Narella.
No
Our zoning officer is here tonight, Joe Eunice. Any questions?
Not yet.
All right, I have a few questions. Are these going to turn all at once or at different times?
So,
I think we would want to ask Mr. Cleveland that question. My experience has been that they don't all necessarily turn at the same time, but a lot of them do turn at the same time. The noise modeling assumes that they're all turning at the same time.
Okay. So it's your testimony that from the first time we were here, you've added 94 motors to the project, and you're saying there's less noise with 94 motors. Is that correct?
No, I'm saying that the highest property line sound level is less than it was previously. There is additional sound on the eastern side of the project in particular, where there were no sources before. Now there are some tracking motors back in that area.
Did you personally test the motors for sound?
Could you clarify the question of what you mean by, did I personally test?
Yeah, did you go out to one of these motors and test the noise levels?
I have not measured the sound levels from this specific tracking motor, no.
So what did you
We're
use?
using
Just the
manufacturer-
Go ahead.
I was just saying we're using manufacturer provided sound level data on tracking motors.
And what's the sound level for each motor?
61.5 decibels, dBA, at 1 foot.
So I am not a sound engineer. So if it's 61.5 decibels at 1 foot, if you measure that by 94, is that a direct correlation to about 5,700 decibels if they're operating all at once?
It is not, no. It's a logarithmic scale, and so we would, the sound level would increase by 3 decibels for every doubling of the number of sources if we were to add them all up, assuming that they're all operating in the exact same location.
And when you calculated it that way, so as each one doubles, so if you go from 1 to 2, it goes up 3 decibels, is that right?
That's right.
And then from 2 to 4, it goes up 3 more decibels?
That's correct, yes.
And then 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 32, 32 to 64, and then we reach our level, right?
Yes, if they are all operating in the exact same location, given that they are spread out, sound attenuates over distance, and so it's not a direct addition because they're not all operating in the same location.
And you have calculation, do you have calculations that you provided for your testimony?
The calculations are in the report, that's the model.
Are all of the calculations there, or just your conclusions?
The sound propagation modeling results are there.
Just the results, but you don't have your calculations, correct?
The calculations are within an algorithm within the model.
Are the algorithm and the model in your report?
No, they're not.
So it's just your results?
Well, we do identify the algorithms that are used in the report, and I've testified to this previously, are from an international standard, ISO 9613-2, which is the algorithms that are used internationally for calculating sound propagation outdoors.
But they're not in your report.
But we identified the standard, and
I appreciate the standard, but they're not in your report for this specific project, correct?
Yes, this is the report for this project, and we identify the standard that is used.
What about the weather station and network station? Did you check any noise levels for those, which are new to the project?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm not aware of any sound emissions that would come from this equipment.
Is the sound from this project constant, intermittent, and if it's intermittent, how often?
The primary sources of sound are consistent during the day. That would be the tractors and the transformer. And then the primary source of sound at night is just the transformer, and that would be consistent at night. The tracking motors would be intermittent in that they would only operate for a few minutes, on the order of 3 to 8 minutes per hour during the day.
And you said it's what was constant during the day?
The inverters and the transformer are consistent. That is assuming that the sun is shining. If the sun is not shining, the sound from the inverters would still be present, but would be potentially lower in level.
So let's just assume it's a shiny week, okay? It's shining 24 hours a day. At the property level, there's going to be a constant noise from the inverters at what, 35 decibels?
The sound level, projected sound level at the property line is 34 decibels, and the primary source of that is the inverter.
And is it fair, is 34 decibels about the sound level for a normal conversation?
No, it is not. It's about, it's on the order of 2 to 4 times quieter than conversational speech.
Well, what would be?
4 to 8 times quieter than conversational speech.
So you tell us, what is something that is at 34 decibels? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, there aren't that many sources that are down that low. 34 decibels falls within the range of what we typically define as a quiet rural area.
So no noise at all? Got something, right? It's 34 decibels, it's not 0.
Could I just ask, the ordinance has a noise standard. We can't, and I don't believe the Borough Council can rewrite that noise standard for this project. And the testimony has been based on that noise standard. The applicant's burden is to show compliance with that noise standard. And we produced the report to show that and had the testimony. I
appreciate that. And this court here is free to accept or reject an expert's opinion. So I just want to ask some more questions to educate everybody here and give them an idea what we're talking about. So with that, if you could answer that one question. At 34 decibels, can you give everybody here an idea what that would be equal to?
Yeah, it would be 4 to 8 times quieter than conversational speech, and it is often described within the range of a quiet rural environment. The background sound levels of a quiet rural environment.
And that's all you have, nothing else?
Yeah, frankly, there aren't that many sources that produce sound that are that low. That's background sound levels outside. It's difficult to go out and measure sound levels that from a source that are much lower than that, because background sound levels are at that level.
Okay. All right, does anybody have any questions based on my questions or any questions that were asked after your questions? Before we do that, a sound at 34 decibels would be similar to a very quiet whisper, wouldn't it?
Yes. It could be. It depends. A whisper at about 10 feet away is around 40 decibels.
Okay. Because, you know, we all have Google, so I'm not an expert, but that's what just popped up. So a very quiet whisper would be going on constantly throughout the day. Is that correct?
No, the range of whispering this is a generalization. The range of whispering can vary quite a bit. So I can't say that a whisper would be going on 24 hours a day.
I didn't say 24, I just said during the day.
Again, it's a generalization. My testimony is that the sound level would be 34 decibels during the day, and that is comparable to a quiet rural environment.
And would 34 decibels also be similar to rustling leaves?
No, rustling leaves is typically considered higher than that, on the order of 40 to 45 decibels.
And would 34 decibels be similar to the faint tick of a clock?
Again, like whispering, the sound levels from rustling leaves is a range of sound levels. You can't tie it to a specific number. And so could there be a low wind that causes rustling leaves to be around 34? Potentially. And for the clock, I'm not aware of, off the top of my head, what background sound levels would be for a clock.
Okay, I don't know, I'm just telling you what's on here.
Well, and Attorney Farrell, I would just like for the record to specify what you are looking at, so we have that on the record. And I would ask that, and I would hope that that's not taken as any kind of counter expert testimony to the testimony that a clearly qualified expert is giving in this proceeding.
Yeah, I didn't testify, I just asked them questions. And it's Search Labs AI overview, the first thing that popped up when I said, what sounds like 34 decibels? With that, anybody have any questions based on my questions or any other questions that were asked after you asked questions? So we'll start with the interveners. Jace Ford.
No, sir.
Cheryl McDonough.
No.
Elise Von Anna.
No.
Maria Miller.
No.
Eugene Hediger.
No.
Teresa Stratton.
No.
Shana Delaney.
No.
Mr. Don Miller.
No.
Randy Thorpe.
No.
Shane Bailey.
No.
Jane Varco.
No.
John Batoski.
No.
Wayne Maycheck.
I don't.
Dean Stratton.
No.
Mayor Norella.
No.
Joe Eunice. Okay, Council.
I would now like to call Jennifer Brunty. Thank you, Mr. Duncan, and if you wouldn't mind holding on the call, just in case additional questions come up later this evening, we'd appreciate it. And also, if you could stop sharing your screen and we can have Jennifer put hers up. And Jennifer, are you there? Are you able to hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see my screen that I'm sharing?
Yes, now we have it. Thank you. Ms. Brunty, I believe you've heard extensive testimony this evening about the changes and the revisions in the site plan and the equipment specifications to the tracking system. And you prepared, and what has been provided to the board this evening is Exhibit H1, which is a revised glare hazard analysis. Did you prepare that analysis?
Don't answer that yet. Jennifer, could you raise your right hand for us, please? You swear affirm the testimony you're about to give us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I did.
Thank you. Now you can answer.
Did you prepare Exhibit H1 this evening?
Yes, I did.
And Exhibit H1 is a revised glare analysis that uses a tracking panel system in place of a fixed panel, correct?
Yes.
And I believe in one of my statements earlier this evening, I indicated, and I want to make sure this is accurate, but your analysis is estimating a panel that will track between 10 degrees at a resting angle and 50 degrees at the maximum angle. Are both of those numbers accurate for your analysis?
Yes.
And in doing your report and revising your report, the report is contemplating the same solar panel or the same assumptions regarding the solar panel, which I believe in your prior report was that it's a smooth glass panel with an anti-reflective coating. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And the testimony that you heard earlier and the statements you heard earlier about what a tracking panel does, could you just elaborate on, in a single axis tracking system, what the panel, how the panel tracks with the sun, what that means in the system?
So this is a picture of the Forge Solar help page on their website. Basically, the panels sit on a torque
And
tube.
would you be able to just hit share on your screen? Right now, we just have the video view.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. This is a picture off the Forge Solar Help page on their website. It kind of shows what happens. So the torque tube.
And if I could, just to clarify, this is in Exhibit H-1. Yes, it's a page in that exhibit.
And just, you mind if I describe it? It looks like a sketch of a solar panel, which is blue with green grass under 2 posts. Is that correct, Counselor? For the record?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
That's the figure that everyone can see. You can continue, Ms. Bronte.
So the panels rest on a tube that rotates throughout the day, starting at the 50 degrees facing to the east, following the sun, and to maintain the maximum the maximum desirable angles to collect the greatest amount of sunlight, which is at the 90 degrees that was talked about earlier. The angles. So this came up. It's kind of a difficult thing to explain, but this figure helps a little bit. So when the sun is high in the sky, the sunlight comes in at an angle and it bounces off at that
Just for the
same
record,
angle.
would you identify
And
what to look at for each one?
Ms. Bronte, if I could just interrupt for a second. You now have up, I just want to get on the record, and the council asked that we get on the record. This is a figure 2, I believe, from your exhibit, H-1, your revised glare analysis as well.
Yes.
Is that correct? Thank you. You can continue.
So when the sun is high in the sky, the angle comes in at a pretty sharp angle and bounces back off at a sharp angle. And basically you need to be hovering over the panels to be affected by it. What happens when the sun is low in the sky is it comes in at a pretty flat angle and bounces off at a fairly flat angle. So viewers closer to the ground are more able to see the glare resulting from the sunlight when the sun is low in the sky. Now the difference is with the fixed tracking or the fixed tilt system, there's no way to move the panels out of the way. They're going to get this low glare twice a day, this low incident or this high incidence angle glare twice a day in the morning and in the evening. With the single axis tracking, the panels can be rotated in such a way that at the time of sunrise or sunset, the sunlight won't be bounced off at such a low angle. So it's an ability to manage the tilt of the tracking that allows the what would normally result in glare, because they can manage the tilt of the glare with the tracking angles or the tracking system, that results in less or no glare at sunrise and sunset.
So the tracking system then, Ms. Brunty, with the panels moving to correspond roughly with the sun, produces that low incidence angle shown in your graph throughout the day and at morning and evening in particular, as opposed to getting that high incidence angle in the morning and evening. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the graph underneath it is just a graph showing, I believe on the y-axis of the graph, you have the sunlight reflected percentage, and on the other axis of the graph, you have the angle of incidence. And that graph, as I interpret it, is that the higher the incidence angle of the sun, the higher the percentage of sunlight reflected. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But, so by reducing the low incidence angle with the tracking panels, you've reduced on that graph the percentage of sunlight reflected. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So, and before we get to the results, in your analysis, I just want to ask you again, and in the first iteration, or in the last iteration of your report that you testified about, I believe you testified that you did a glare analysis from a low point on the panel and also a high point on the panel to get the full range of glare reflected by a panel. Did you also do that this time?
Yes, I did.
And what were the heights that you used or that you ran in your analysis? Panel heights, to be clear.
The panel heights, they were an odd number. Hold on a second. .33 feet for the lowest of the end of the panel and 8.17 feet above ground level for the highest point of the panels.
And so your glare analysis was taking into account glare that would be created by the panels, indirect glare that would be created by them within that range. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your assumptions that were used in your prior analysis regarding structure heights and vehicle heights, did you change any of those assumptions, or is this analysis consistent with the assumptions you previously used?
Yes, I used the assumptions that I previously used.
And was there any change in your assumptions or in the topography that was input into the model for this site?
No, I didn't change anything with the topography.
And your site and the locations of the arrays as you modeled them, are those consistent with the change in the location of the arrays shown in Exhibit C1, which we discussed earlier?
Yes.
And in your prior testimony, I believe you indicated that your model assumes 365 days of full sunshine in this location or in the study area. Is that consistent and the assumption that's made again in this analysis?
Yes, that's the assumption for all glare analyses. That's how the program operates. So yes, 365 days of sunshine, full sunshine.
And in your prior analysis, you had modeled a number of obstructions that were related to vegetation as well as existing vegetation and existing structures in the study area. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in this analysis, have you taken into account any of those, that existing vegetation or any of those existing structures?
No, I deleted all of those.
So in this analysis, you're not, you're effectively treating the study area as though it has no trees or it has no buildings or structures that would block any potential glare.
Yes, for all of those viewing points showing on the screen, it assumes that they all have a full view of the panels.
And And again, for purposes of a glare analysis, that would be the most conservative state that you could model, is that correct?
Yes,
And in the prior analysis that you did, you were showing and modeling as obstructions as well, screening that was proposed by the applicant, is that correct?
yes,
And the purpose of that helped to mitigate glare in that prior analysis, is that correct?
yes,
I believe there was testimony earlier that we removed, and the proposed site plans removed some of that screening, but are still keeping the screening around the perimeter of the fencing of the project. But my question for you is, in your glare analysis that you've done, in the revised glare analysis, have you considered any of that screening, or have you likewise removed all of that screening and assumed no obstructions to the potential glare?
I've removed all of the screening and assumed no obstructions.
So in this report and in the model that you prepared, you're assuming 365 days of full sunlight and no obstructions to the potential glare created by that sunlight on these arrays. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In your original layout, you analyzed 3 airports and 2 helipads. Did you again analyze those same airports or flight paths and the same helipads?
Yes,
And in the prior report, there was some glare at the Honesdale Sports Complex helipad. Is that correct?
yes, that's correct.
And you did include that helipad in this analysis, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in your prior report, you analyzed road segments for glare that included Belmont Turnpike, Silvercrest Drive North, US Highway 6, and Wayman Drive. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And did you include all of those road segments in this analysis that you performed?
Yes, I didn't change anything.
And in that prior report, there was some glare shown along Wayman Drive, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Wayman Drive, again, is included in this analysis.
Yes,
And in your last report, you analyzed 28 different residences within the study area. Does that sound correct?
yes, that's correct.
Did you include all of those 28 residences in the study area again in this report?
Yes, actually, I wanted to say that it was 26
26.
residences
Okay, I'm
in the
sorry.
first report, but yes, they were all included, and I added a bunch more in this study.
And-
The program allows you to analyze up to 40 points at a time. The first 2 points were taken up by the helicopters, and the rest are houses and other structures in the vicinity of the array.
And so how many observation points have you modeled in this analysis?
There's 40 of them, 2 of them being the helicopter pads.
So
The rest
38
being-
other structures then?
Yes,
And did you, in this analysis, at the last hearing, there was testimony about I believe it was a daycare, it was formerly a nursing home at, I believe, 186 Belmont Turnpike, just adjacent and south of the property. Did you include that property in this analysis?
yes, that one's included as OP 28.
And can you describe, and Ms. Brunty has up on the screen, I believe and maybe Ms. Brunty, if you could, would you be able to go to the report and the exhibit that you have of the properties shown in the report, so that we can make sure that what you're showing is consistent with what the board is seeing in the study. And this is figure 5 from exhibit H1, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you identify with your mouse or with the hand where the additional properties are that you've analyzed in this analysis?
I added OP28, and then the others are everything above OP28. So here, this building is included, and the rest were down further south, down around here. I can't see that too well on the screen.
So they were in the vicinity or along US Highway 6. Is that, I believe that's the road that you were
Yes.
identifying there.
Here you can see the numbers better.
And then you also added the landowners, Ms. Drake's structures or buildings along Belmont Turnpike on the project site, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So you've modeled considerably more, I believe, about 35% more observation points on this model, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And based on the revised layout, did you find any glare resulting at any of these properties with the change to a tracking panel system?
No, the change resulted in no glare to any of these observation points, to any of the routes, or to any of the airports or helipads. There was no glare to anything.
You have, this isn't the first glare analysis you've done of a tracking system, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have any estimate or idea how many tracking systems you may have analyzed in the past?
I've done over 150 projects, and out of those, probably 15 have been fixed tilt panels. The rest have been single axis tracking.
So probably in the neighborhood, or at least 135 projects that you've analyzed with single axis tracking, is that correct?
Yes,
Is that,
approximately.
and based on your experience with the two different types of systems, is this a result that you would expect by going to single axis tracking panels?
Yes.
And do you believe that the model and the analysis of the single axis tracking system in this analysis is accurate and comparable to what you would expect to see for a tracking system?
Yes, this model is considered the industry standard for predicting glare. If it didn't predict glare accurately, nobody would be using it. But
And in your experience, this is, and I believe it was your testimony previously, this really is the single dominant in almost every glare study uses the software that you've used to do this analysis. Is that correct?
yes, I've never seen anybody use anything else, except I saw a couple people tried to do theirs by hand, but this is the industry standard. This is what everybody refers to.
And when we say this is, you mean the Forge Solar software that you used?
Yes.
So then, just to summarize, based on the changes that were made in the panel layout, and I guess just to clarify, there was testimony about the change to single axis tracking system required shifting the array rows 90 degrees. Your model is consistent with that shift, correct? So in your model,
Yes.
the array rows are running north-south and the panels are facing east-west throughout the day.
Yes, it's done by setting a torque tube at 180 degree. In this case, it was 100, the panels are slightly offset. In this case, it was 182.5 degrees north-south. But yes, the tube they rotate on is north-south, and they rotate from east to west.
And so, in your professional opinion, with your experience performing, I think you've indicated in excess of 150 of these analyses for projects for solar facilities, is it your opinion that this project and this layout and configuration of panels will not produce any glare on any adjacent flight paths or helipads?
I'm confident in the software. I am confident that there will not be glare if the panels are operated as stated in the assumptions that I was given.
And that again is that they would rotate from, the rotation angles would vary from, the maximum angle would be 50 degrees and the lowest angle would be 10 degrees, is that correct?
Yeah, the resting angle would be 10 degrees, so between the panels reaching their maximum tilt and the time that the sun goes down, it would be rotated at 10 degrees, rested at 10 degrees rotation.
And you, it's your professional opinion as well then that there would be no glare predicted or no glare occurring on any of the roadway segments that you modeled?
Yes, that's correct.
And it would also be your professional opinion that there would be no glare at any of the structures, including buildings, non-residential and residential buildings that you've modeled. There would be no glare at any of those structures. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm confident in that.
And again, those opinions been offered to a reasonable degree of professional certainty.
Based on extensive experience with modeling these, yes. But I have a reasonable degree of professional certainty that there will be no glare to the receptors that I modeled.
And is there anything, and in your report you have, and you've included an extensive number of pages with the output of your modeling, correct, to show the output from the software that led or you base your conclusion on, is that correct?
Yes, there's a lot of pages to show that no glare was found.
Thank you. That's all I have right now.
Okay, Jay Sporer, do you have any questions for
Yes.
the glare expert?
Jay Sporer, intervener. Jennifer, I live directly across the road. I'm OP 13. Last time around, with the old set of plans, I got the most glare of anyone.
Right.
Now, it seems to me that when a panel is rotated towards me to eliminate my glare, this would increase the glare on someone else. Can you explain to us why this is not the case?
Well, the glare, so you were receiving glare at sunrise.
Yes, his property is to the west of the project.
Right. It goes back to the incidence angle in the rate that I showed in the report. It's the sunlight bounces off at the same angle that it comes in at, and having the panels flatter, it's not bouncing back towards the sun, it's bouncing away from the sun at the same angle that it comes in at. I'm not sure how to answer your question though. Can you please restate it?
I was just asking you to show us how when the panel turns towards my property to eliminate my glare, how it does not create glare on a neighboring property, say someone off of Wayne Drive. Since when the panel was facing south to start with, and I'm to the west, I got glare before.
You got glare at sunrise when the panels were fixed and could not rotate at all to get away from the low angle glare. The glare.
And Ms. Bronte, maybe I could ask you, and maybe this is part of the answer, but the sun continues to rise in the east and set in the west despite changing the direction or the layout of the arrays, correct?
Yes.
And previously, that indirect glare that was reflected off was coming from the east and being directed towards the west at the intervener's property. Is that correct?
Right.
So moving the panels 90 degrees, the sun's still rising and setting in the same part of the sky, it would not create a north-south effect the same as existed previously with the fixed tilt system. Is that correct? In addition to the fact the panels rotate?
Yes.
So you wouldn't expect to see the same outcome now, but just to the north and the south of the property because the sun's not setting, not rising in the north and setting in the south. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, one additional question that I also asked last time around. With what percentage of certainty can you assure us of your findings?
Well, no model is perfect, but I'm certain to a reasonable degree of professional experience. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say 95%. I've done over 150 of these analyses, and I've only gotten one inquiry afterwards stating that things weren't as the model said, and it turned out that things were as the model said. They were just operating the system in a way that they weren't supposed to. So out of 150 plus projects, I haven't had any complaints. So I'm reasonably certain that this software is accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Cheryl McDonough.
Well, I have just a question for my own satisfaction. On this picture here, this is the
So there's on the bottom corner of that picture, it'll say an exhibit number or something,
Figure
or figure
three.
number. Figure 3 we're referring to.
where it's the panels, the solar panels. Now,
Figure 2.
I just want to know,
That's figure
It's figure 2. I think.
figure 2, Sharon?
yeah,
Okay.
when these rotate, do they rotate this way or do they rotate this way?
So
I don't know if she can
this-
see you.
Huh?
I don't know if she can see
Yeah,
you.
she can't.
Oh,
So she,
well, do they rotate left to right or up and down, I guess?
East to
They
west.
rotate. So the panels themselves, the panels are facing east in the morning, and then they rotate flat.
Ms. Bronte,
Yes.
would you mind going to figure 3 in your report, and maybe since you're not here, maybe I can show it better, or describe it better. That's good.
Well, that's what
So
I'm saying.
on-
This is the panel.
Sharon, just, I think that shows it pretty clear.
yeah, so on this and the
Because I don't see it on the picture.
so the coordinates are here. The system is running. The array and the frame of the system would be running north-south. This is the perpendicular access to north-south. That's the access that the panel rotates on. So throughout the day, it will begin, and at the end of the day, the low part will be tilted towards the west.
This is the
And
low
right
part,
now-
so that'll go up and
Yeah,
this part
so
will
in the
come down.
morning, when the sun's coming up, and you can see it's facing towards
Right.
the sun, towards the east. In the evening, it will be the opposite, towards where the sun is in the west.
This will go down this way then.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's a teeter-totter.
Yes, that's a
Yes.
good, it's a teeter-totter. Is a good, very simple description of it.
Okay,
That it,
that's
Sherry?
it.
Elise Van Anen,
No questions.
Maria Miller,
No questions.
Eugene Hedinger,
No question.
Teresa Stratton,
No question.
Shayna Delaney,
No questions.
Don Miller,
No.
Randy Thorpe,
Questions.
Shane Bailey,
No questions.
Jane Varco,
No question.
Planning Board, John Vitoski.
Yeah, I have one question. So you're saying that these panels will not give off any glare at all, correct?
They won't give out glare that is above a threshold that's been established. I can't show it to you right now, but an extensive literature research was done when they originally developed this program to determine basically levels of light that would be considered green or yellow or red glare, and if the light level of reflectance was below the literature established intensities, there would be no green, yellow, or red glare at all.
So
So-
is your answer yes or no?
So I think that
There's no glare based on the parameters of the program. I can't say that you're not gonna see any light coming off of it at all, but the levels of light are below the thresholds established by the program based on extension literature research.
So, Ms. Brunty, is your testimony that there's no measurable and no noticeable or perceptible glare coming off of the panels?
Yes.
So my other question is, why is there going to be a buffer setup?
Screening?
Buffer screening.
Your, I believe your ordinance has provisions in it for buffers, and we are providing for a buffer in the locations where there's not already natural screening on the site. Again, that's something that the applicant will screen as much or as little of the project as the Borough Council wishes the applicant to do for this project. We're showing screening that fills in wherever there isn't natural screening already around the site.
What is the purpose of the screening?
The purpose of the screening is simply to show that there's screening there. It's going to reduce visibility of the panels to some extent, but it's to show that the screening is there as requested in the ordinance.
So what's the reason for reducing the visibility of the panels?
There's and again, so to clarify and back up, this is a use not provided for. Your ordinance has general standards that apply. There's no specific correlation or reason. I mean, perhaps that would be a better question for your solicitor, Mr. Shepstone, what the reason and the purpose of it would be. But we're showing that screening. Again, the applicant's willing, if the board, or Borough Council desires more screening, that can be done, and the applicant would be willing to do that. If they desire less, they would also be willing to accommodate that. Screening, again, and I want to emphasize, we're here on a conditional use. This is a zoning matter. There is a land development plan that will have to follow this stage. The law in Pennsylvania is that the applicant must show compliance with the objective criteria of the ordinance. The technical details are left for the land development plan. It will be worked out there. The applicant will have to bring a more detailed plan for land development. And again, the applicant is willing to work with the Borough Council on screening, whether the Borough Council wants more or less of it.
Would you say that the screening was there for the purpose of an eyesore?
I'm not sure what you define as an eyesore. I did not write the ordinance, so I can't tell you what the intent of that is.
Buffers,
I do know.
I'm a zoning officer. Buffers are used for like aesthetic purposes. So yeah.
Yeah, so you don't have
So
to look
you don't have
at
to look
it.
at it.
Okay. I'm good.
I guess if we could follow up to that. Are you worried about losing the view of the hills in there and the fields? Is that an issue, John?
No,
Would you rather have
I'm-
and I don't know the answer. Would
I'm-
you rather have a fence so as not to see those, or would you still rather see those and see the hills and trees back there, which is a nice view, I know.
Right. I'm just saying that if, that this could be an eyesore.
And that's the purpose of the screening, the buffering.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
But we lose, if there's screening up, a fence or whatever, then you lose that view that goes along with it. And
Sure.
I-
You can put a
Yeah,
billboard up too.
That would be a nice one.
You know, it's a trade-off, and I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Pennsylvania courts have also addressed that issue. In fact, one of the best known cases is from Harvey's Lake, which is not too far away from here. But aesthetics are not a basis for denial of an application. It's not something that rises to that level. And I believe in this ordinance as well, there's quite a few other uses allowed in RR that would probably be junkyard, for instance, multifamily dwellings, things like that, that would potentially be more impactful on aesthetics than what is proposed with this. Are there any other
Wayne Machin,
questions?
I have no questions.
Dean Stratton,
No question.
Mayor Norella,
No question.
zoning officer Joe Eunice.
Yeah, I have one. Now, with this study, you pointed out all the places that, already exist that have no glare, that will have no. Now, how about potential development in the future? Now, is there any spot that will get glare? That, can we, know where that is?
Well,
I can only speak to the areas that were included in my analysis. I can't speak to anything that might happen in the future.
No, but I mean, is there a certain spot that will get more glare that, obviously maybe there's no building there, but will that spot get more glare? Is what I'm trying to say. Is there an area that potentially will receive the brunt of the glare?
There's no glare predicted.
Okay.
And if anybody was going to be seeing glare, it would be the landowner's house being right there closest to the array. If that's not seeing glare, then I wouldn't expect anything else that came in to see glare. But again, if it's something that I haven't modeled, I can't speak to that.
and Ms. Brunty, you have modeled whole roadway segments, which is an extended area for potential glare impact, correct? And maybe you could just explain briefly how those roadway segments are modeled. And you haven't found any glare on those segments, correct?
Correct. I found no glare on the segments. The model looks at the points that I have on here, and it also looks at glare. If there was glare between the points, well, the glare would have to be on the points and between the points, but somebody could put a house or something between some of those points, and it might model differently than just what I have on the road.
But you would have you would have no reason to expect that, given the points that you've already modeled, you'd have no reason, there's no higher probability in your mind that those would have glare compared to what you've already modeled.
Yeah, OPs 29, 30, and 31 are what, if those don't glare, then it's highly unlikely that anything else coming in would see glare.
Thank you.
I have no questions.
I would like then to thank you, Ms. Brunty. I'd like to move on then and present Tommy Cleveland, or Thomas Cleveland. Mr. Cleveland, are you there?
Yes, I am. Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, we can try and get the view corrected so you can see you. Do you mind sharing your screen and your report, because that'll bring up, I think that'll bring up you as well. Okay. And would you please, for the record, Mr. Cleveland, state your name and just spell for the record?
Tommy Cleveland, Cleveland.
And what is your occupation, Mr. Cleveland?
Hold on. Mr. Cleveland, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thanks.
Can you state again, what is your occupation, Mr. Cleveland?
I'm a renewable engineering manager, and then that's my full-time engineering position. And then part-time, I'm a consultant on solar health and safety. And I'm here in that area tonight as an independent solar health and safety expert.
And we've provided to the board as Exhibit O your curriculum vitae or your resume. You've reviewed a copy of Exhibit O previously. In fact, did you prepare Exhibit O setting out your education and experience?
Yes, I prepared that.
And so, based on that, you have a BS degree and a master's degree in mechanical engineering, is that correct?
That's correct.
Both from North Carolina State University.
Yes.
And you are a licensed professional engineer, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. In North Carolina and in five other states.
And the information you've provided in the CV, is that an accurate representation of your experience?
Yes, it is.
And in particular, on page 2 of your CV, it does state that you served as an independent consultant and expert witness for over 150 solar projects throughout the United States. Is that correct?
Yes, that is.
And you've actually conducted glare impact analysis and studies for a number of those projects as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you've also conducted studies of EMF and sound impacts for projects, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you also taught at North Carolina State University, is that correct?
That's correct. I've taught a couple of different solar courses there.
And one of those being you actually taught design of solar energy systems in the Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering Department of North Carolina State, is that correct?
That's correct for several years.
And you've also got attached to your resume or your CV a list of publications that you've done. Can you just highlight some of the things that you published and researched regarding health and safety of solar panels and solar systems?
Yes. Before my current position, I was employed at North Carolina State University at a center that focused on renewable energy. And when I was there, I was lead author on 2 white papers, basically public information papers. One was on specifically health and safety of photovoltaics, particularly ground-mounted systems like the system proposed tonight. And then I also was lead author on another paper that was related to interactions between solar and agricultural land uses.
And in particular, your white paper on health and safety impacts of photovoltaics is that, would you characterize that as a well-known publication on the subject?
Gentlemen, we're in Waymark. Could you define white paper for us, please?
Yes. I'd say it's a public education or public information paper from some sort of authority on the topic. So it's common a university group would do that when you've got some group at a university that's an expert on some topic. They'll write a white paper. It's kind of like we want to tell the world about this stuff we know. And so it's a way to inform others that might be interested in it but are not, usually generally not working in that field.
So Mr. Cleveland, to kind of boil that down, it's how experts on a subject matter educate the public as to their subject matter. Is that accurate to say?
That's accurate, yes.
I'd like to offer Mr. Cleveland as an engineering expert in the health and safety of.
Everybody has a right, as an intervener or on council or planning board, to question him as to his credentials. Would anybody like to voir dire him or question him on his credentials?
And we do have the CV for anybody that doesn't have a copy of the
CV would mean curriculum vitae, which will define even a little further, which means his background, okay, and his expertise. It'll have his college experience on there and what he does for a living. So, does anybody object to him being an expert to testify in this field? Okay, then he's accepted as an expert.
Mr. Cleveland, have you had a chance to review the conditional use application that was filed in this matter, along with the revisions that we discussed this evening to change the panel layout to the tracking system?
Yes, I've reviewed all of that.
And you've had a chance to review, I believe you originally reviewed the conditional use site plans that were Exhibit C, and have you also had a chance to review, in addition to Exhibit C, have you also reviewed Exhibit C1 with the new panel layout?
Yes, I have.
And have you reviewed the key manufacturer, the manufacturer specifications that were submitted at the last hearing? And again, just to back up, just to clarify for the record, you were on the Teams call and you sat in the last hearing in November on this application, is that correct?
Yes.
So you did hear all of the testimony and witnesses testify at that last hearing, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And you had a chance to review the equipment specifications for the panels, inverters, combiners that were submitted as Exhibit F in that prior hearing, is that correct?
Yes, I did review those.
And did you also get a copy of and have a chance to review the tracking system, the TerraTrack specifications for the tracker system that was proposed with the revisions in the plan and submitted this evening as Exhibit N?
Yes, I have.
Based on your review of the panels that were proposed for this project, being the V-Sun solar panel that was submitted with Exhibit F, can you describe and give your analysis of those panels and maybe just a brief overview of your analysis and assessment of those panels and that selection of panel for this project?
Yes. This is a well-known manufacturer of what is the most common technology for solar panels, which is a crystalline silicon panel. So it's a silicon panel from a well-recognized manufacturer. Well-recognized, but also meaning that it's well-recognized as a high-quality manufacturer. And the product is certified to the required United States safety standards, and is also certified to an international performance standard that shows that it's been tested by approved third-party testing labs, that it meets those standard requirements.
And would you say that those panels meet or exceed industry standards for solar panels?
Yes, definitely.
And those panels are anti-reflective. Could you describe what that means from a technological standpoint with the panel?
Yes, that's a extremely thin coating on the surface of the glass. It's only a few molecules thick. It works to minimize reflection when the sun is hitting the panels straight on, like hitting the panels perpendicular. So it's there to maximize the amount of sunlight that makes it through the glass into the solar cell. And when the sunlight's hitting the panel perpendicular, nearly 100% goes through the glass and doesn't reflect. It's something like 97%, maybe 98% of the sunlight goes through the glass and into the panel.
And in your professional experience, and just to I guess put in context your experience with projects, have you visited actual constructed solar facilities as part of your professional work?
Yes, I have, mostly in North Carolina and South Carolina, but also some other states. But in those two states, my engineering day job has had me out inspecting those projects on behalf of the electric utility that they're connecting to at somewhere over 100 projects that are similar scale to this. The majority of those have been 2 to 5 megawatt projects.
So, and in your testimony this evening, you are relying as well on that professional experience in which you've actually seen in the field with constructed projects. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's correct.
These panels, getting back to the panels, these panels also utilize bifacial technology. Can you just explain that briefly?
Yes, it basically just means that the solar cell can accept sunlight from both the top surface and the bottom surface. So solar panels have always been able to accept from one surface and had glass there. This is a relatively new change in manufacturing technique. And so now to also accept sunlight from the back, which you get a little bit of from just reflecting off the ground, the back side of the panel is also clear. So they will have a sheet of glass up front and then also a sheet of glass on the back side. So both the front and back are clear, and both the front and back can get useful sunlight into the solar cell in the middle.
And while we're on this subject, could you describe, and I believe you have up currently Exhibit M, which is a report. Did you prepare Exhibit M?
Yes, I did.
And could you describe what Exhibit M is briefly?
Yes, it was a health and safety assessment of the proposed Belmont Turnpike Solar Partners project. And so I looked at what was proposed, with the equipment proposed and the layout and the location, and went through a number of potential health or safety community impacts, either positive or negative, and walk through each of those potential impact mechanisms, and provided a little bit of commentary on each topic, and determined whether or not the project would have any impact on public health or safety.
And so, since we were just talking about the solar panels, if I could ask you to go to the, I believe you have,
I do have an image, a blown up image of a solar panel. I didn't shoot it already. It's not included in this report, but I can put that on the screen and show what's in a panel.
if you could share that, since there have been questions about that, if you could share that, so that everybody can have an opportunity to see what those panels consist of.
Yeah. And this is not specific to this manufacturer, but this is an image that was created by part of the U.S. Department of Energy, the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, to show what's in a typical panel. And while there's quite a few manufacturers of panels, it's really close to a commodity product in that it's a technology that everybody's building something quite similar. So this is extremely representative of really any manufacturer's silicon-based panel. Although what this is showing is not a bifacial panel. There's only a very small difference. Really, the only difference between what's shown here and bifacial is this back sheet. This is showing, instead of having a sheet of glass on the back of the panel, having this opaque piece of protective plastic. And with a bifacial cell, it's as simple as not having that back sheet and instead having a second piece of glass back there. Most all the weight of the panel is this glass cover, or front and back covers if it's got front and back glass. Somewhere around 70 to 80% of the weight is the glass. And then the next heaviest aspect is the aluminum frame. There's an aluminum frame there for just protection and rigidity for the panel. And those two together are somewhere over 80% of the weight of the panel, just that glass and aluminum. And then you've got these clear films of plastic. It calls it here polymetric encapsulation, EVA. And EVA is used in more or less industry-wide in every panel. That's a certain kind of plastic. And it's the same plastic that's in an automotive windshield. So it's totally clear, you don't know it's there. But that's what keeps a windshield from falling apart. If it breaks, there's a layer of EVA in the middle of it. The glass can shatter, but then that EVA holds it all together and maintains the waterproof nature of that windshield. So you've got this same material on top of and behind the solar panels. So those are encapsulating the solar cells, keeping them away from moisture for 30 or 40 years while they're out in the environment. So there's never any water getting to any of the working parts of the panel. And it's a zoomed in what the panels are made of. It's primarily made of these solar cells that are from refined silicon. They're nearly 100% silicon. And that silicon is simply quartz sands where they heat it and get the oxygen to come out. You're left with just the silicon that was in the sand. And then tiny little wires that collect the electricity from those solar panels, some of those solar cells, and get the electricity to eventually come out the back of the panels on these two wires that come out the back of the panel. And that metal that transfers all that electricity is some combination of silver and tin and copper and lead in various aspects. For everything I've talked about here, all these different components, the only portion with any possible health or safety impact is that the lead that's just a part of the solder. So where these tiny little wires get attached to this bus bar at the end, you have little drops of solder to connect those smaller wires to the bigger wire. And that solder is roughly a third lead. It's the same kind of solder that's used and has been used for decades in nearly everything that has solder in it. Because it's the arrangement of solder that works best at a wide range of applications. So that's particularly looking at it from a health or safety perspective. That's a breakdown of what's in a solar panel. So you see there's nothing liquid there, and those encapsulation layers keep moisture away from everything inside the panel. Even if the glass breaks, it's still very difficult to get moisture or water into where the metals are.
And you mentioned the lead or the solder content in the panels. Is that the same solder that would be used to solder any common electronics or household appliances, common everyday products that we would recognize?
Yes, traditionally that is the solder that's been used. Everything from radios to TVs to coffee makers.
And is there I think you testified that the majority of the panel is the aluminum frame, or by weight is the aluminum frame in the glass. Is the amount of lead solder that's in these panels, is it anything that is a health and safety concern? Does it rise to that level in any way?
No, it doesn't. It's a few grams, 10 or 20 grams per panel. I forget what that is. An ounce is half an ounce, I believe. So a small amount of lead per panel. If you put that in perspective, how much lead is just naturally occurring in the soil. Soils all over the world have naturally occurring lead. And there's good data in the U.S. on lead naturally occurring in all the states. So I looked, for this project, looked at the amount of lead occurring in soils across Pennsylvania and took the average number from that. And looked at how much lead is in all the solar panels at this project inside the fenced area. And that's about the same amount of lead naturally occurring in the top 2 or 2.5 inches of average Pennsylvania soil. Just to put it in perspective, that this is a very small amount of lead and a similar amount to what's already naturally occurring in the soil. And it's extremely difficult to get this lead out. It's well protected with this glass front and encapsulation layers. I wouldn't expect any of this lead ever to come out.
I just want to go back briefly, and we'll address, and I think you have some more general comments on some of those impacts and health and safety issues in your report, which we'll ask you to summarize. But first, I want to go back and I want to ask you, did you have a chance to review the proposed inverter, the Chint Power Systems inverter proposed for this project?
Yes, I did.
And again, could you just give us your brief assessment of that project and whether or not that meets or exceeds industry standards for inverters?
Yep, this is the best-selling string inverter in the U.S. for the last several years, and I think internationally as well. So it's extremely common, very well respected. People continue to buy it because it works so well, and it meets all of the required performance and safety standards.
And in Exhibit F that you had reviewed previously, there was also a combiner specified for the system, and I believe there was testimony previously that the combiner essentially combines electrical lines into another line to go to the inverters. Did you have a chance to review that equipment, and can you give just a short assessment of that, and maybe you could also give just a brief description of what the combiner does?
Yes, it's typically referred to as a DC combiner or string combiner, and it makes a convenient way to connect together a number of wires that are electrically parallel, and then connect a bunch of smaller wires together and have one big wire coming out on this side. It just essentially combines those. And it's made to conveniently do that and safely do that. So I believe this model has fuses in it, and it will be required to be UL listed to a couple of different standards. Show that it's safe.
And then, as well, you were provided a specification for the single axis tracker that was proposed now for the project. You've listened to quite a bit of testimony about the tracking systems and the motors, et cetera, this evening. Could you give your description from an engineering perspective, how the trackers work and how the motors work in a system like this?
Yeah, and if I'm hearing that conversation, if I can share these two, I just went to their website and pulled a couple pictures, I think, to help make it easier to explain. So this is looking here on I'll show on the left here, and I'll get rid of this picture so I make it a little bigger. This is just to put in perspective the size of these, the structure, and you see the person here about to install this different size or smaller size solar panel, which is what is shown over here on the right. And I'll make this bigger. So somewhere around the middle of the row is where the motor is. And this whole long row is just showing a small piece here, but it's a much longer row of panels. All rotates along this tube. So this whole tube turns, and there's big bearings. At each place there's legs. There's bearings to make that center axis turn easily. And this, I can't tell if this is morning or evening, but this would be an orientation when the sun is the direction that we're looking into the screen out there in the distance. The sun's relatively low in the sky, either morning or afternoon. The panels will be tilted facing toward it. And then there's this little solar panel per motor. So it's this little solar panel that provides all the energy for the motor. And the motor is this black little thing sticking out here at the side. If you remember that person standing here, you know it's just something like this size, like a water bottle size. So it's just tiny little motor with the gears inside this gearbox is able to turn the solar panels. They're turning very slowly and just a little bit at a time. So it'll spin a few minutes, rotate it just a small amount, and then wait until it's told to do the same thing again. some number of minutes later.
And how does that work then throughout the day? You just described kind of typically what happens from sunrise to sunset during the day.
If we, let's think, if we imagine this is an afternoon time, so these panels are facing the sun in the afternoon. A few hours ago, these rows would have all been horizontal. So right around noon, all the panels would be horizontal. See, the sun would have been off to the left. So the sun will be off to the left, a little bit in the southern sky. At noon, these panels will be flat. And then the sun's going to be moving away from it, like we're looking into the sunset, and the sun will be going down toward the horizon in the direction we're looking. And probably somewhere around now, the panels are going to start tilting the other way. The last couple hours, they've been tilting more and more and more to face the sun. So as the sun went down, they just turned and faced the sun. But if they kept turning and tracked the sun all the way to the horizon, then this row of panels in front of us would shade this row, and you actually wouldn't get very much sunlight on your panels because each row would shade the row behind it. So the control system does something it calls backtracking, and it basically flattens out the panels when the sun starts getting really low in the sky. It flattens them out just enough so that one row doesn't shade the next row. And it'll keep doing that, it'll keep flattening and flattening and flattening as the sun gets close to the horizon, and then it'll stop at the 10-degree angle that was mentioned earlier. And by stopping at that 10-degree angle, you avoid the situation where you've got low sun that can glance across flat panels.
And then at the end of the day, does the system reset for the start of the next day?
It does. I don't know exactly how this would be programmed. You've got a lot of options there, how it's stowed at night. Different manufacturers do that control differently. But yeah, I don't know exactly when it'll move, but by the time the sun comes up in the morning the next day, it will have moved and be ready to capture the rising sun. So all these panels will be facing toward us now. Instead of looking at the back side of the panel, we'd be looking at the front side of the panel in the morning.
And based on your knowledge of these systems and your experience in the field with these systems, you had a chance to look at the revised glare analysis for this system and for the tracking panels. Can you give us your assessment of that analysis, and is that analysis consistent with what you would expect in your experience and in the field, that there was no glare impact found?
Yes, I have reviewed that newer study, and yes, it does align with what I would expect. And it really all comes down to what you heard earlier, which is the way this glass reacts to the sunlight hitting it. The glass and the anti-reflective coating is really, and the trackers, they're all looking to maximize the amount of sunlight that goes through the glass into the solar cells. So they're trying to keep these panels more or less facing at the sun. When you do that, glass just reflects very little light. Almost all the sunlight comes through, which means there's almost no reflection. So the opposite of a mirror. But with any glass, including any glass on these panels, see if when that sunlight hits the panels at a really low angle, a real glancing angle, then you'll get more and more reflection. Such that at really low angles, most of the light is reflecting off. And that's really the only case you might get glare from these panels, is when the sunlight's hitting at a real low angle, bouncing off this way, and then people over this way where the light's going to can possibly see glare. So with the tracker, the whole point of it is that as much as possible, keep those panels facing toward the sun, so you don't have that glancing angle. You mostly have the sun come streaming only time that changes is right around sunrise and sunset with that backtracking I described earlier, which is the whole system trying to keep one road from shading itself, shading the next road. But as long as you don't allow those panels to go all the way horizontal, you avoid a situation where you'll have anybody see glare. Because that little bit of glare that does happen at that time is going up in the sky, it's going up over anybody's head that might see it.
And so the analysis that was provided to you, you feel as though that is an accurate representation of what would happen with this project and this tracking system programmed with angles on the panels from 10 to 50 degrees?
Yes, the way that was entered into that glare analysis software is the way that this project's planning to use this tracker. So yes, I think so. That analysis was an accurate representation of the proposed project.
And would you, I know you analyzed a number of other health and safety aspects of the project. Would you just give a brief overview of the other health and safety aspects that you've analyzed for this project?
Yes, I'll scroll down the report and show what those were. Talk briefly about traffic. There will be some construction traffic, but then extremely little traffic after the project's built. One risk that technically exists is some electric shock. And the public would not be at risk of this at all. It would be outside of the fence, and there's warning signs saying hazardous electricity along the fence. But the technology is extremely safe. The project's required to be built to meet National Electrical Code. The equipment's required to meet UL safety standards, and as we've already pointed out, the solar panels and the inverters and the combiners meet those standards. So it's nothing that I view as any potential hazard to public health or safety. Next, I looked at fire. Similar to electric shock, there's technically some amount of chance that the electrical system, you could have an arc that can start a fire, but there's really not a chance of it spreading beyond that initial location because there's so little flammable material in the panels, and most everything out there is just solar panels. There's those thin plastic layers. Similarly, there's a little bit of insulation on the wiring in between the panels, and it's that plastic and wire insulation is all that can burn. So fires with these kind of projects have not been an issue across the country. There's thousands of similar size and larger projects across the country. There are some examples where fires have started, but they stay very small, and they have not produced any hazard. Toxicity, we've already really talked about quite a bit, which really boils down to concerns from the panels themselves, which I've already discussed. And the same thing that this says here is what I talked to earlier about what's in the panels. Electromagnetic fields, or sometimes referred to as EMF or radiation. EMF can occur in many different varieties or